The forgotten doll. Lily always loved antique shops. There was something magical about the old, forgotten items, each with its own history and secrets. One day, while browsing an old shop in a remote village, she came across a peculiar doll. It was exquisite, with porcelain skin, glass eyes, and dressed in Victorian attire. Its eyes seemed to follow her every move, and she felt an odd connection to it. The shopkeeper, an elderly woman with a mysterious aura, warned Lily that the doll was cursed. She claimed it brought misfortune to its owners. Dismissing it as a mere superstition, Lily bought the doll and took it home. That night, strange things began to happen. Lily awoke to the sound of faint whispering. She turned on the light, but there was no one there. The doll, which she had placed on a shelf, seemed to have moved. Its head was now turned, and it was staring directly at her bed. Over the next few days, the whispers grew louder. Objects in her house would be moved, and she constantly felt like she was being watched. She tried to ignore it, but the feeling of dread grew. One night, she woke up to find the doll sitting on her nightstand, its glass eyes unblinking. Terrified, Lily decided to get rid of the doll. She drove to a nearby forest and buried it deep in the ground. Relieved, she returned home, hoping the nightmare was over. But the following night, the whispers returned, more insistent and angry. Lily woke up to find dirt and leaves scattered on her bedroom floor. The doll was back, sitting on her nightstand, its dress soiled and its eyes filled with malice. Desperate, she contacted the shopkeeper. The old woman revealed the doll's dark history. It once belonged to a girl named Emily who died under mysterious circumstances. Her spirit was trapped in the doll, seeking vengeance on anyone who tried to discard her. The only way to break the curse was to return the doll to Emily's grave, located in a long-forgotten cemetery. Lily had no choice but to comply. She searched for days and finally found the cemetery. Trembling, she placed the doll on Emily's grave and apologized for disturbing her. The air grew cold, and Lily felt a presence beside her. She looked up to see a ghostly figure of a young girl, her eyes sad and filled with sorrow. The figure nodded, and then both she and the doll vanished. Lily never spoke of the doll again, but the experience left her haunted. She avoided antique shops and lived in constant fear that Emily's spirit might one day return. The Cursed Portrait. In the heart of the city stood an old mansion, long abandoned and shrouded in mystery. Among the many legends surrounding the place, the most famous was the story of the cursed portrait. It was said that anyone who looked upon it would be doomed to a terrible fate. Alyssa, an art student with a fascination for the macabre, decided to investigate the mansion for her thesis. Armed with a flashlight and her camera, she entered the decaying structure. Dust covered every surface, and the air was thick with the scent of mold and rot. In the grand hall, she found it, the portrait of Lady Eleanor, a woman renowned for her beauty and rumored to have been a witch. The painting was stunning, capturing her piercing blue eyes and enigmatic smile. Alyssa felt a chill as she gazed at it, unable to look away. As she photographed the portrait, she heard faint whispers. Ignoring them, she moved to explore the rest of the mansion. The whispers grew louder, echoing through the empty halls. It sounded like a woman's voice, chanting an ancient incantation. That night, Alyssa experienced vivid nightmares. She saw Lady Eleanor, surrounded by fire, her eyes filled with rage. Alyssa woke up in a cold sweat, the whispers still echoing in her ears. Determined to finish her research, she returned to the mansion the next day. In the attic, she discovered Eleanor's diary, filled with cryptic entries and dark rituals. It revealed that Eleanor had been wronged by her lover and sought vengeance through black magic. She had trapped her soul in the portrait, cursing anyone who dared look upon it. As Alyssa read the diary, the temperature dropped, and she felt a presence behind her. She turned to see Eleanor's ghost, her eyes burning with hatred. The ghost advanced, and Alyssa felt an overwhelming sense of dread. Desperate to break the curse, Alyssa grabbed the diary and ran to the grand hall. She recited the incantations she found, hoping to release Eleanor's spirit. The mansion shook, and the portrait began to glow. With a final chant, a blinding light filled the room. When it faded, the portrait was gone, and so was Eleanor's ghost. Alyssa felt a sense of relief, knowing she had freed the tormented soul. She left the mansion, the whispers finally silenced. Alyssa's experience with the cursed portrait became the highlight of her thesis, but she never forgot the terror she faced. The mansion remained abandoned, a testament to the dark history that once haunted its halls. The Silent Woods. In the small town of Eldridge, there was a forest that no one dared to enter. The locals called it the Silent Woods because no sound ever escaped from it. Legend had it that anyone who ventured in would never return. One autumn evening, a group of teenagers, fueled by bravado and curiosity, decided to explore the Silent Woods. Among them was Jake, a 17-year-old with a thirst for adventure. Despite the warnings, they stepped into the forest, the dense canopy quickly swallowing the last rays of sunlight. As they ventured deeper, the silence became oppressive. No birds, no rustling leaves. Not even the sound of their footsteps seemed to echo. It was as if the forest absorbed all noise. The deeper they went, the more disoriented they became. The path seemed to twist and turn, leading them in circles. Jake felt a growing unease. The silence was unnatural, and the air was thick with a sense of impending doom. Suddenly, they stumbled upon an old, decrepit cabin. The wood was rotting, and the windows were dark and lifeless. Against their better judgment, they decided to enter. Inside, the air was stale and musty. Dust covered every surface, and cobwebs hung in thick curtains. They found old furniture, a rusted stove, and a bed with a decayed mattress. But what caught Jake's attention was the large, ornate mirror on the wall. Unlike the rest of the cabin, it was pristine, with a polished surface that seemed to glow in the dim light. Drawn to the mirror, Jake felt a compulsion to touch it. As his fingers brushed the glass, a cold, chilling sensation shot up his arm. He recoiled, but it was too late. The mirror's surface rippled, and a pale, ghostly face appeared, its eyes hollow and empty. Jake screamed, but no sound came out. The ghostly figure reached out from the mirror, its skeletal hand closing around his wrist. The others watched in horror, paralyzed by fear. With a forceful yank, the figure pulled Jake into the mirror. The cabin was engulfed in darkness. When the remaining teens fled, they found themselves back at the edge of the forest, panting and terrified. They never spoke of what happened, and the Silent Woods remained a forbidden place. Years later, The cabin was found, but Jake was never seen again. Some say his soul is trapped in the mirror, eternally silent, just like the forest that claimed him. The abandoned asylum. Jonathan was an urban explorer, always looking for the next thrill in forgotten places. When he heard about the abandoned Blackwood Asylum, he couldn't resist. The asylum had been closed for decades, rumored to be haunted by the spirits of the patients who suffered there. Equipped with his camera and flashlight, Jonathan entered the asylum at dusk. The air was thick with decay, and the building creaked ominously. Graffiti covered the walls, and broken glass crunched under his boots. As he explored, he found old medical equipment, patient files, and rusty bed frames. The deeper he went, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. In the basement, he discovered a series of cells where the most dangerous patients were kept. The air was frigid, and he felt an unsettling presence. Jonathan set up his camera and began filming. Suddenly, he heard footsteps echoing in the hallway. He called out, but there was no response. His flashlight flickered, and he felt a cold breath on his neck. Turning around, he saw a shadowy figure at the end of the hallway. Panicking, he ran, but the figure seemed to follow him. Jonathan stumbled into a room filled with old records and shut the door, trying to catch his breath. The temperature dropped, and he heard whispers, faint but growing louder. In the corner of the room, he noticed an old, rusted chair with leather restraints. As he approached, the whispers intensified. He felt a sharp pain in his head, and images flooded his mind, visions of patients being tortured, their screams echoing through the asylum. Jonathan realized he wasn't alone. The spirits of the asylum's victims were trapped, reliving their torment. The shadowy figure appeared again, this time clearer. A tall, gaunt man in a white coat, his eyes hollow and void of mercy. He was the head doctor, infamous for his cruel experiments. The doctor advanced, and Jonathan felt an invisible force pinning him to the chair. Straps tightened around his wrists and ankles, and he struggled in vain. The doctor's face twisted into a malicious grin as he reached for a rusty scalpel. Desperate, Jonathan closed his eyes and screamed. The force released him, and the room fell silent. When he opened his eyes, the figure was gone, and the door was ajar. He grabbed his camera and fled the asylum, vowing never to return. When he reviewed the footage, he saw the shadowy figure and heard the whispers. The asylum's dark history was real, and its spirits were still trapped, seeking vengeance on anyone who disturbed their restless slumber.